an important moment in looking at the future of agriculture. Indeed, perhaps go so far as to say that it's almost worth thinking of this as agriculture's Thomas Cook challenge, how you take a long-standing industry through a process of challenge and of change. And the point that I want to make in looking at that, if the technology worked, is that the challenges are brought to our attention by Brexit. Brexit will bring some changes. Brexit can be seen as accelerating many changes, but quite frankly, there is an awful lot of change out there beyond Brexit that is coming at the same time that we would have to consider whether we wind up remaining in the European Union or running our own policies, with Wales deciding its own policies. So we're looking at the innovation that this event is to be about. We're looking at changes in markets, public tastes, and various points around that. And then, of course, environmental concerns, and particularly now, as of the last few months, the tightening of the demands on us, particularly on land use, which come with the government's tightening timetable on climate change mitigation. The new target of net zero emissions by 2050 is very challenging indeed, and will pose requirements around carbon sequestration in competition with food, in competition with bioenergy, in competition with plants for plastic, very much putting pressure on many of the things that we do. And inside we face, and we now know, and we're having to face up to and recognise the fact that we have a long-standing issue across the whole UK economy, but certainly in agriculture, around improving our productivity. Structural change, we've held a lot of that back with the single and basic payment schemes, opening that up so we get the right people onto the land to do the right things. The people who can win a margin out of the industry, use the new technology, look at the new markets, is going to be very important, and that turns on issues like skills, investments, innovation, and on, from my end, very much the kind of work I deal with around land occupation, how we open up those markets so that people can take the industry forwards. And we're doing this in a world that is moving very fast. The simple figure in that slide, if you want to look at it, is the growth of people, the world's middle class, the people with the money to buy food in the Far East. 10 years ago, 21%, 11 years' time, 2/3. That all those extra people with their own appetites, their own spending power, that is a real shift in the world economy, but also a shift in the food economy, and something that we need to be able to take account. While Europe becomes a lesser share of things, it becomes an older population, and we are still dealing with the new technologies, which is, if we don't use them, our competitors will. You're looking at them being taken up across the Americas, in Asia, and yet Europe sitting there and being doubtful about them. One of the opportunities that comes with Brexit is the chance to look at those where they suit our book, to work on those. We've got, obviously, immediate proposals from the Welsh Government around where we go, moving from BPS, area payments, shifting the money over in quite short order to sustainable farming scheme. Looking to come to market deals with you, with farmers, about how land is managed so that it gives wider benefits to the public, but from which you can earn a profit. May just talk about that a bit more, but willing to put capital into helping with greater productivity, helping the industry earn money. And so we're waiting now with the second round of that consultation. But all that is the wider world. None of it is under the control of any individual farmer. And I think this comes back to recognition of reality and of responsibility. These are decisions to be looked at by each business to find its own way forward through this. And that's where events like this are so important, and where I trust that the slides and the talk I'm doing now paves the way for the much more specific presentations that are come on this stand later in the day. And the critical thing, I think, if we want a shift of approach, it's the approach to looking at business margin. I could look at the farming world and think that on the whole, provided people feel there's money in the bank, provided they got cash flow, provided they got access to the bank overdraft, then they feel that they can get to tomorrow. Successful businesses are the ones that look to their margin, are looking to make profit for reinvestment, profit that will help fund retirement, profit that will build the business, profit that will take it on over the generations. And it's looking at that issue of where we go with margin. And that's a big challenge as BPS goes, because BPS is almost all margin. The danger is that people have come to rely on it rather than on the way they're farming their business. And if BPS goes, the new schemes may have less money, we wait to see, but they will not offer that level of margin. So how businesses react to that, I think it's a very powerful driver. It forces businesses then to look at their costs. It forces businesses then to take other decisions. It may mean that those who've relied on BPS as a means to survive to tomorrow may have to take much more radical action. And that process is about managing change. And you can argue that area payments have held us back from thinking too hard about change. We may all feel we've seen quite enough of change, but there's a lot more of it out there to come to. And that's change about who is going to be farming, looking at the proficient, the able, the efficient, and the how of farming, the techniques they will use, the methods they will use, how they will look at structuring their businesses, and then managing all that as we go through. But the critical thing is how to find and win and hold commercial margin. And I think it's worth looking at that as a time window. We have, pick a figure, 6 years. That's actually quite a tight time window to look at understanding the pressures, the changes that are coming as BPS is moved away from, and getting businesses ready for the kinds of challenge with Brexit, with changing trade, but with all those other larger pressures from technology to climate and changing markets that we're looking at. And so if there's a single point about today, it's about thinking, taking stock, having an open mind, looking at what's coming, judging your circumstances, talking it through. Because this is something for families to look at and work their way through, deciding, and then acting and implementing those decisions. And I think 6 years for many businesses, with the kind of change that implies, is actually quite a challenging timescale. So where do you want to be in 10 years' time? Who in the family will be farming? Who's got the appetite for this? What are your strengths, resources, opportunities? And they'll differ between businesses, just as will liabilities, weaknesses, and threats. An honest review is the starting point for this. Understanding the outside pressures, but the only thing you can do to respond to them is what you have under your foot. The old adage that the only thing the farmer controls is what's under his boot is absolutely true at this point. Responsibility lies at home. And so it's everything. We'll look at some things briefly in the minutes available about enterprise choices, but looking more broadly beyond that. But the theme in this is to manage change, because if you don't, change will manage you. And the issue is then looking at being adult and looking at that. And I've been quizzed before on platforms. Well, we don't know about this. We don't know about that. We can't see where trade is going. The simple point is, I can't see a point in deferring improvement. You might as well get better now rather than wait to be forced into it later. And in that, obviously, it falls to me, particularly Secretary to the National Association for Agricultural Valuers, to promote advice. But I think, look at it. The value of an external view. The value of a safe challenger as a trusted advisor who can put points to you, give advice, look at it in the round, give the sense of perspective. Because it is terribly easy to feel lonely, to feel battered, to feel on the receiving end of events. And if you were to try to master events, then actually having an external view, having somebody you trust, having somebody who can put points that are challenges but not threats is important. And equally, with what goes on within families, somebody who can help facilitate change, help talk people through from their various positions, their hopes and aspirations as we go on. So, advice as value, and this is a direct quote from the Welsh Government's Sustainable Farming in Our Land, the document we all have to respond to by the end of the month, end of next month. Advice here they see as investment in the future of farming. And I think that's the right way to look at it. It's finding the right advice, seeing it as investment. Investment as money spent to yield a return in the future of the business. Not just having it to tick a box, not just having it as a displacement activity, not just having it because you've been told you ought to, but taking it because it is useful and making use of it. So you've got a range of options, we'll talk through more, But I think there's a very interesting challenge when we look at the pressure on margin as to how far in half a generation's time we will see businesses still so focused on commodity production. It's a bleak set of winds that blow in the world of commodity production with the world markets. And in the UK, as a high-cost country, we should probably be looking more at ways in which you differentiate products, in which you can add value, in which you can be seen to do something special, from which you can earn the kind of margin that gives you the return that you want. Enterprise choice, as I've mentioned, the public goods, the environment. Can we make the environment an enterprise that yields its own profit for people on farms? Where are we on generations? Generational change over that period of years will happen for some families more than it'll happen for others. Is this generational change, though, outside the family? Where do you find a value and a virtue in seeing somebody else farming your land well and giving you a good rent that might be a better income than you were earning from farming it? Those are the roads that will be open for some, and of course non-agricultural diversification. You can look at all those and say there's nothing novel in that, and frankly there isn't. It is that Brexit gives us the moment, the historic sense of occasion, to take stock of where we are and where we're going. And if we don't take this moment, when on earth will we? And so those questions could have been put 20 years ago. They could be put in 20 years' time. But if we do something about now, we may do something very good for the fortunes of Welsh agriculture. So we looked at where you might go with the environment. If we get the Welsh Government to price the public goods options to give a profit, then it's a competitive enterprise. Good soils can mean good farming as well as storing carbon. Trees may offer some shelter, but they can also store carbon, but use land that might otherwise not be there for profit. They could give a margin to unprofitable farming, and possibly an alternative, of course, to letting out. But this is a deal. You want to look at these schemes because they're good for your business. Is the deal between you and the government, or indeed the water company, or the supermarket, or the processor who may be just as interested in these goods, is the deal a good deal for you? Innovation, obviously one of today's themes. And there'll be a lot here talking about innovation in technology. You'll be very familiar with that. That sense of everything that's going on at Harper Adams and elsewhere, coming rapidly, precision farming, just as realistic for livestock agriculture as for arable agriculture. That's there, but I put deliberately on this slide, looking at markets first, because that's where we perhaps look less at innovation. But how are you going to market produce that people are willing to buy and pay you the extra shilling that gives you that extra profit for the business, for the family, for reinvestment? Looking at change on the ground, and this is where really we're looking at land occupation, farm structures and so on. Entry into the sector, expansion of good businesses, and of course exit goes with that as well. And how do good businesses start and grow? Each will actually find their own way to be a seedbed and go on to harvest. But this critical thing, and it's a phrase coming out from Ireland, is about getting land into the hands of the trained and looking at how we use the tools that are available to earn the money, because the range of farming performance, the range between good and bad businesses is phenomenal. There are hundreds of pounds of acre of margin difference between the best businesses and the worst businesses. Shifting that average does wonders for overall economics. But talking about this, and the script on this may be a little small to look at, but if we're talking about restructuring and looking at change, it is actually worth taking stock of where we are with the capital taxation that, of course, comes to bear on so many farming decisions. We can always find the tax system irritating. We never quite like to live up to our responsibilities under it. But actually, if you compare where we are now with where we've been in the past, it is about as benign as it's likely to get. If you are talking about gifts down the family, if you are talking about disposals, if you're talking about restructuring that moves assets, it's difficult to see that the tax system on capital taxes is likely to get more kindly over the next 10 years than it is now. That is a further reason, again, for looking at what is the right structure you want for your business now, rather than saying it's a job for the day after tomorrow. Because the day after tomorrow could see inheritance tax, capital gains tax, the other taxes that bear, all significantly more difficult for us to handle. It might get better, but I would suggest the odds are indeed the other way. So choices. I've already flagged the one about whether you want to be and can be a good commodity producer. We clearly have people who are good commodity producers in this country, but they are in the same market ultimately as Brazil, as America, as Russia, as the rest of the world. What is it that we can do that adds special value? And those great new markets of the Far East seem to see British food as offering assurance, as offering quality, in a way that perhaps a Frenchman or an Italian might not. But if you're looking at not being a commodity producer, how do you add that value, or how do you get value out of the other assets on the farm? And in that, obviously, looking at land, do you need more land? Actually, is some of the land you've got not earning money for the farm? Are there things you can do with that? How do we get entry? How do people get access to land without having to buy it? And that obviously means we're looking at joint ventures and tenancies. And what are the deals for that? And I think one of the things, though, that's coming through in that world is the logic of increased scale for businesses, that restructuring means fewer, larger businesses, is the logic of a purely commodity production sector. Once you step outside that, then actually, and you're focusing on margin, you're focusing on added value, and you're looking at where some of the new technology goes, smaller machines, getting more productivity wins out of smaller fields and for smaller businesses, actually this may be the first time in 2 generations that the logic of scale is no longer the power that we've seen before. And so you look at the kind of logic that comes through on that for land. But it's very critical. The Irish government, this is a quote from the Irish government that's done a lot of work on this, worried about exactly the same productivity problems that we've got, and it sees the magic to the answer as lying in giving the proficient access to land. Their land market turns over about once in every 500 years. Small owner-occupiers holding on to what they've got. How do you move the use of land between people? And opening up those markets. And so the question is, if a farmer of any age, and it's too often that this debate focuses on age, I want it to focus on proficiency. Who are the competent? Who are the people who will make the margin? What makes somebody who's wearying of farming see value in letting somebody else onto the land which they continue to own, continue to have the benefit of, continue to live in the house? And as I said, this is about proficiency. There are issues around this of housing, and the Welsh Tan 6 policy has been more effective than perhaps has been given credit, but looking at the other obstacles as well to try and crack these, and that's where I'm doing a lot of work at the moment. Landlord and tenant, an area where there will need to be a lot of conversation. The tenant, so far as a tenant, has less collateral to face all of this, probably very often has to be the more commercial because of that. But what does the landlord want from the estate? What does the tenant want as we face all of this? And the need to talk together positively about how to get advantage and opportunity out of this, or how to manage change so that somebody can retire with dignity and new opportunities for new people. Contracts, again, and I'm working at the moment on livestock contract farming agreements as another vehicle for handling this, as a means by which young people can come in and by which established people can grow. But looking at those new people coming in, they have a big task to take on. We're expecting a lot of them. It'll be a much more varied, much more diverse sector than we've been used to. They needn't be young and they needn't come from a farming background. It's character, skill, competence and outlook are probably the key things. A willingness to look at risk, grit as part of that. Access to capital always helps, and the problem at the very beginning is that of building capital, building a floor for the business. But we're coming into a world of restless change, and that's a world that we have to be able to rise to, and those are the expectations. So watching the clock tick by and conscious that somebody at the back is going in 5 minutes to tell me something, and the chance of questions, just to try to reduce this to a plan. I haven't numbered them, but there are 10 points here, just to work through. It tells the same story in perhaps a different way, and that may help somebody see something in it. But the first base is simply understanding where you are, taking stock of where you are, get the management information. Which members of the family own what property? That's often more confusing than many people think. Getting a record of it out. What do we actually got? What are our capital assets? Where are our strengths, weaknesses, opportunities and threats? What do we know about the land? Soil surveys, yield data. Which fields are really worth farming, and are there others that are perhaps less worth the effort where we can use resources differently? Looking very strongly at benchmarking, seeing where the standards are. At least it's a means of posing questions to yourself. You may have good answers why you're different, but asking the question is critical. What skills have you got? What skills do you need? What skills are elsewhere in the family? I'm thinking one business that has gone from very marginal to very successful precisely because of the marketing skills of the daughter-in-law and what she brought to that business that the farming side of the family did not have, and that those functions working together. What's actually going to happen to the family over the next 10 years? What might you expect when everybody is 10 years older, 10 years more experienced, 10 years more weary? And indeed then issues of debt and death and divorce, the traditional challenges. What assets have we got that we can reuse, looking at age profiles? All that's simply taking stock of yourself. How's the money flowing? Develop a cash flow. Test it for changes in product prices and yields. If we talk an awful lot about subsidy, for the average business, a 10% movement in product price is the same as a 50% shift in subsidy. Look at markets, not subsidies at this point. Markets are where farmers make most money. Markets are where you will have to thrive in the future. But use a cash flow. Check that through. Test the cash flow over some years. Take BPS out of it and see where you sit. What are you going to do to remedy that hole in the cash flow? And again, keep testing it. And are you getting the money out of this to deliver a lifestyle that you would like? Or indeed, as the last line suggests, any lifestyle? What are you going to do then to answer the challenge that's there? But what you're doing is you're posing the future as a question for you to look at now. You're looking at it in the eye and then try and manage it before, as I said, the risk of it managing you. And of course that's the point at which it's very easy to go off to the pub. Pack up, this is all too difficult. But no, this is the point actually where you look now. What are the options at going ahead? And some of that's about what others are doing. You do have the option, and some do it, and we know people who do it, of just simply, as the phrase goes, hunkering down. Take the pain. People without debt and without labour can just carry on eating, living less. But and that may be an answer. And for some people, it may be exactly the answer. It's difficult to see it as positive, but it may actually yield more margin. And the bank manager, if it's a choice, may well accept it better. It may be inevitable, but let's look at the opportunities of doing something better. Always the talk about collaboration. Can you do things with neighbours? If every farm is equipped the way it would like to be, all farms then have more equipment than they need. How can you deal with that, whether by working with neighbours or a machinery ring? And again, the discussion about land that I've talked about just now. But making the best use of it. We've talked about the environment and enterprise. Is there land that could, under the Welsh Sustainable Farming Scheme, earn you more money through public goods and a contract with the state or indeed others? Are there ways in which that actually helps you have a more productive farm business? Field by field, what do you know about what your farm can really do? There are lots of things that farmers know intuitively, but actually a good soil survey or the sort of yield mapping, the sort of data out of precision farming can really start giving you the story and understanding. I was up in Scotland last summer and we were digging 5-foot deep holes in the farm, looking at the soils, and in one field you could see the farm manager's eyes suddenly crystallise. He now saw a reason why things he knew in his bones about that field were, and now what he could do about it. Telling a story, getting a grip on that, frequently very useful. Best use of other assets. What spare buildings have you got that could then earn you money in other hands? Maybe residential development, maybe something commercial, maybe another use within the family, other ways forward in this. If you're looking at diversification, of course, the risk is it's the last throw of a business that's already failing. So you're putting more capital into it for management that's already overstretched. That's the risk.
If you're looking at diversification, why didn't you look at it 10 years ago? There could be good reasons. There could now be opportunities that weren't there. It's just always a little too easy to see it as the alternative, but for some people it is exactly that, and it's broadening the base of the income streams that give you more resilience for the future. Again, looking at other family members, the skill sets, how you're going to deal with this, and where you go on family succession. Having set that out as an agenda, looking back at ourselves, do we actually have the appetite for this? As I said, grit and risk are part of this. There's hard work in this and difficult decisions. And we may have to change the farm that has been in the family for so long. But that's the kind of change that Thomas Cook didn't make. And now we've seen where they've gone. And then, going back to the tax slide, is actually now the right time for the farm to move on in the family, or in other ways, taking advantage of the situation that we are in? And of course, one answer in all of this is the answer of stepping back from farming, whether by generational change, or by sale, or by making the land, keeping it in the family, keeping it for the future, but making it available for others to farm to produce the kind of income that delivers that, and releasing your time to do the other things, whether going contracting, other work, earning other money, taking advantage of your own resources in the best way that you can. And what you will have seen from that is that the answers are all individual. They lie not in the stars, but in ourselves. They lie in our choices. And what I'm hoping, and the point of this and the talks that follow me, is to try to help people make realistic and right choices, best advised, best tutored, because we are looking here at the opportunities that Brexit brings. The best way to have a glum Brexit is to be glum about it. You've got to take a look at your options, see where you can go positively. Each decision is for each farmer, but if we get this right, we'll have done something very positive for Welsh agriculture. Thank you.